Thanks for joining. We're going to give it just one more minute before we get started. All right. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. As I think you all know, if you're here, we are kicking off the first public solicitation period for new projects for the 2029 Coastal Master Plan. And today we're going to do kind of a slow walk through the basics of what the master plan is, what we're looking for in project ideas, how we screen and evaluate projects, and then we'll actually have a bonus session at the end for anybody who's really new to this process and wants to stick around and go through some slides about how to develop a project idea if you've never done that before. So that's the plan for today. Before we get started, Brian, would you like to say anything?
Oh, okay. Hey, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Brian Lazina. I'm the Chief of Planning and Research here at CPRA, in which the master plan is housed in the work that we do here amongst this team. So first off, thank you for all being here today. I cannot stress enough how important this is to the process for the states, i.e. your coastal master plan here. I mentioned to a group yesterday, maybe in the future, one of these days, AI will do a lot of this stuff, or deep learning or deep faking and all that, whatever that is, but not today. Right now, this is your expertise, your experience that really drives this plan. We don't let something turn loose and get these ideas. The ideas for these projects come from you, either in the past, the present, or things you might see in the future. So again, we appreciate your effort today. We appreciate this as we go through the process. And thank you for the input to ultimately make this the best plan for you, the individual here in coastal Louisiana. So thank you. Thanks, Katie.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, and I am Katie Freer, for those who don't know me. I am CPRA's Assistant Administrator for Strategic Planning, which mostly means that I get the pleasure of leading the team that develops the next update to the Coastal Master Plan. We have a handful of additional Master Plan team members here in the room and on the line. So we have Ashley Cobb, who's a manager, Jessica Converse and Valencia Henderson, who are two coastal scientists on our team. Eric White, who's a water resources engineer and is our lead modeler, is also on the line, as is Denise Reed, who is a coastal expert and scientist who is a core part of our team as well. So we have lots of people to help answer questions. My plan is to just go through a bunch of slides, then stop, discuss, have questions, then go through some more slides, and so on. So I'm going to start with the bottom line up front. The bottom line is, as I said, we are soliciting for new project ideas for evaluation for potential inclusion in the 2029 Coastal Master Plan. We want to emphasize that anyone with an idea of how we should go about reducing land loss or storm surge based flood risk in coastal Louisiana is qualified to submit a project idea. We're accepting projects from now through the middle of October. And for the first time, we have an online form that we're asking everyone to use to submit their project ideas to us. If you registered were able to register for this workshop, then you know where our website is that houses all of our resources. And that's what this QR code and link will take you to as well, the same place where you registered. All right. Again, I'm going to start with these quick facts and then I'm going to repeat them again at the end. But as I said, anyone can submit an idea through our online portal. The level of detail this year is flexible. So we'll take anything from a description of a coastal challenge, a problem that you see that's related to land loss or storm surge flood risk, all the way up to something that's just about ready to go out for construction. The more detail you provide, the more input you have on how we understand your project and how we screen and evaluate it. But you don't have to provide a ton of detail if you don't have it, if it's not there. We can fill in the gaps for you. I want to emphasize that this is the first of two project solicitation periods. So right now we're having our first project solicitation period through mid-October. We're going to have another one toward the beginning of 2026. But there's an advantage to submitting your project idea now in this first public solicitation period. If you submit your project during this period and it gets screened out, for some reason, we don't feel that it's ready to be included for further analysis for coastal master plan inclusion, then we will provide you feedback about why we screened it out, and you'll have the chance to revise and resubmit your project in the next public solicitation period. So we highly encourage everyone to try their best to get their project ideas. So I'm going to go back to the first slide real quick, since I think folks couldn't see it, is my understanding. This is just a basic summary of what we're talking about today, and the fact that the new project development period is kicking off. This link is the same as the one that you used to register for the workshop, or the website on which you found the link to register for this webinar. Okay. We talked about project ideas that get submitted in the first submission period. I want to hit this really hard. First submission period, if they get screened out, you'll get feedback and you can resubmit. We cannot offer the same feedback, revise, resubmit process in the second submission period. So please submit in the first. High-level guidance: avoid extensive overlap with any master plan projects that you found that you can see in the 2023 master plan. And you can view those in our master plan data viewer to see what they are. So all of those projects are already going to be on the table for the 2029 plan in one way or another. So you don't need to duplicate those. And then very high level, big picture, what happens if you submit a project? So submitted projects get screened. If they pass the screening, we're going to evaluate them through modeling. Then we use the modeling results to find the best combination of projects to meet our goals within constraints. And those projects get included in the master plan. That then makes those projects eligible for funding when it becomes available down the line. So I'm going to go into more detail in those things, but for anybody who has to drop off quickly, those are the biggest points I wanted to cover today. All right, so getting into the real agenda. We're going to talk first about some of Louisiana's coastal challenges. Then we're going to explain what the master plan is, talk about specifics of master plan projects and what we're looking for in project idea submissions. We're going to cover how projects are screened and evaluated, and highlight some of the resources that we're making available to support new project development. And then finally, for those who want to hang on and get some more details about how to develop and submit a project, we'll cover that topic as well. Okay, so coastal Louisiana is where we live, work, and play. So more than 60% of the state's population actually lives in the coastal parishes. The coast is the core of a number of different industries and economies. This is just one example. So the marine economy employed over almost 90,000 people in 2021, but there are a ton of more examples, and that number could rise easily if we included them. And as we all know, this is the sportsman's paradise. This is a place where we really love to take advantage of the coast for recreational activities. And together, all of these things make up what we care about along our coast. And this is a highlight of what is the coastal zone. When we talk about the coast, this is what we're talking about, these 5 regions. All right, so what's going on in the coast? High level, in the last 100 years, we've lost over 2,000 square miles of land. And if trends continue, then we are on track to continue to lose up to 3,000 square miles of land over the next 50 years, which will exceed the size of the state of Delaware. This is what our projections that we put together for the 2023 master plan. This is how they show that land loss occurring potentially over the next 50 years. You can track that blue is where we're losing land over time, converting to open water, and the green is where we actually are gaining some land. We're maintaining it. All right. Okay. And that translates into increased flood risk as well for all of the people and industries within the coastal zone. So modeled flood deaths 50 years from now, using our lower planning scenario, can look something like this. All right. So there are a number of things that, a number of dynamics, a number of processes that really drive the challenges that we're seeing on our coast. The increased land loss and increased risk from storm surge-based flooding, among others. And these are some of the processes that contribute to that. So coastal storms certainly drive erosion and also damages to property. Sea level rise combined with subsidence leads to increased inundation, durations, and depths. We see erosion in multiple ways, and human modification plays a role as well. Things like levees help us and also contribute to the problem. So to get more specific, some of the hazards that we see as part of those, as evidence of those processes, we see saltwater intrusion, storm surge-based flooding, high tide flooding, another type of flooding that we are experiencing frequently on the coast, increasingly frequently on the coast, unsuitable wetland water levels and inundation durations, and a whole lot of habitat degradation and loss. Again, these are just some of the hazards that, that we consider and are working to confront. So what do we do about all this? Well, the CPRA, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, was established after the 2005 storm season. So Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and CPRA was formed as the single state entity with the authority to articulate a clear statement of priorities to achieve comprehensive coastal protection for Louisiana. And one of the core pieces of the way we do that is by fulfilling our mandate to develop, implement, and enforce a comprehensive coastal protection and restoration master plan. So our master plan really winds up serving two high-level purposes. One, it identifies restoration and risk reduction projects that are then eligible for state support for moving forward to implementation. But it also, in the process, provides a wide range of types of information on the potential solutions to our coastal challenges, the challenges themselves and the potential solutions. It is important to clarify that it is a living document. So we update the Coastal Master Plan every 6 years. And the reason we do this is so that it can continue to reflect the conditions on the coast, which continue to evolve, and the best available science and engineering techniques that we have to address those conditions, to understand and address those conditions. So we're always looking, with each update, we're looking forward to the next 50 years. So what are we trying to achieve with the Coastal Master Plan? We've boiled it down to two primary goals. So the first is reducing land loss within coastal Louisiana. The second is reducing storm surge-based flood risk. And while we're focusing on those two primary goals, we're also making sure to be cognizant of supporting the objectives that are really important to us, that reflect the values of the coast. So enhancing protection from flooding, sustaining natural processes, preserving coastal habitats, supporting cultural resources, maintaining cultural resources, and promoting a working coast. So it's important to clarify what the plan is and what it isn't. So it is a living plan to address all of those goals and objectives. It provides what we call a robust suite of restoration and risk reduction projects that we think are going to perform well in a variety of potential future conditions. And it's got information about land loss, storm surge-based flood risk, and other challenges that are related to those that face Louisiana. And it's a tool that we hope that individuals, governments across the board can use to help them make better decisions and take better actions in a cohesive way. What it is not, though, is a direct funding source. So the projects in the plan are the ones that are eligible when funding becomes available. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be funded just because they're in the plan. It also has historically not provided a prioritized or ranked list of projects. It's just a set of projects that together represent our priorities as a state. And it's not detailed or highly specific. Everything is conceptual level, both the way that we enter the projects into the plan and the way that we evaluate them. All right, so how do we develop the plan? We start every master plan update process by pulling together a set of candidate projects. We take those candidate projects and we test them in our models. We model how they can benefit, how they can make progress toward achieving our goals compared to a future without action over a 50-year time period. Then we take those results from that modeling and we analyze them, and often we have to go back to our modeling again. We do a whole lot of work to make the best decisions we can to identify the set of projects that is going to best help us achieve our goals within established constraints. So where do we get our candidate projects? Two main places. One is from past master plans. So all of the 2023 master plan projects that have not yet been funded for implementation come back into the hopper as candidate projects again. And then we get new projects also each time around. And one of the biggest place that we get the new projects that go into master plan, the master plan process, is the public solicitation. So that's the period we're entering right now. For the projects that we receive, we screen them, and those that pass the screening become candidate projects. There are a couple other things we do as we're preparing for the modeling that is really an important core to our whole process. We take any past master plan projects that have now been funded for construction, and we add those to our update of existing conditions. So we collect new data to represent major changes in the landscape that have happened since the last update of the master plan. For example, the major hurricanes that we've seen since the modeling was begun for the last master plan have significantly changed certain areas of the landscape. So we're updating our data to go into the base of our model for our future without action and our projected project benefits. We also take a look at our future scenarios, the way that we understand how the conditions that drive the changes on our coast might change into the future to make sure that they reflect the best available science at the time. And then finally, I want to emphasize that the advisory groups that we have established to support the master plan process, they play a role as well in the analysis and decision-making process that leads to the selected projects. So a little bit more about our advisory groups. We have 4 advisory groups that all perform different roles to support the master plan process. So the first is our coastal advisory team. They provide big picture, coast-wide perspective, really provide oversight on all the major pieces of our process to make sure that the way that we are approaching the master plan update and the decisions we make sense and is well coordinated with other ongoing planning and policy efforts. Our coastal and our CEW, our community engagement work group, has about 30 members, and these represent a diverse set of perspectives, a range of perspectives from across the entire coast. And the main thing that they do for us is help us do a better job of connecting with communities. So a better job of making sure that our products will make sense and resonate, and then also making sure that the actions that we're taking related to outreach and engagement are the best way to actually connect with communities. We always have room for improvement on this item, and we are always striving to do a better job, and they really help us to continue forward progress in better connecting with communities. Our PMTAC, our Predictive Models and Decision Support Technical Advisory Committee, is a set of nationwide experts that looks under the hood at our modeling and the way that we make decisions to make sure that we are continuing to reflect the best available science in those processes. And then finally, our regional work groups have experts from around the coast that help us focus region by region on region-specific issues and how to develop and refine project ideas to address them. All right, and the result of this process for the 2023 plan was this, right? So for the 2023 plan, we wound up selecting 77 projects that together, if they were all built in full, would reduce land loss by 200 to 300 square miles over 50 years. So substantial reduction in land loss over the 50-year time period. They would also, if built in full, reduce damages from storm surge based flooding by 60 to 80%, depending on the scenario that we look at. So sometimes it's hard to see what this really means from a map like this. And so we actually have some better visuals zoomed into each of the regions of our coast to kind of highlight what this looks like, what this could look like on the ground if these projects were built in full. So again, this is for the 2023 plan. These are the projects that were included. So this is a view of the Cheniere Plain. We'll go west to east. You can see a lot of marsh creation, some hydrologic restoration as well, and a little bit of ridge restoration. This is our central coast. You can see some structural risk reduction along with some marsh restoration here. The Terrebonne Basin, which has a combination of a number of different project types. The Barataria Basin. And finally, the Pontchartrain Breton Basin. This is an orientation we're not quite used to. These are the Chandeleur Islands here, and you can see New Orleans here in the center. So off to the east here is Bay St. Louis and then Biloxi. All right, so before I get into specifics about project types and what we're looking for specific project types, are there any questions about that overview of the master plan and how we develop it? You can enter questions in, is it the chat or the Q&A?
The Q&A.
The Q&A.
We have one question. How many of the 2023 master plan projects have been funded and completed through CPRA?
That's an interesting question. So I do have a slide a little bit later on about about how much CPRA has completed over its whole time of work, right, since 2005. But I don't have on hand exactly how many 2023 master plan projects have been completed. It really takes a fair amount of time between when a project is approved in a master plan and then gets matched up with a funding source, then goes through the engineering and design process, and then gets permitted to then be constructed. That process can often take several years. And so there might be a few projects from the 2023 plan that are in construction right now, but often there's a lag between them.
We have a couple of hands raised. Valerie, I just unmuted you if you'd like to ask your question. Or Clay, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning. I had a quick question. So with the suite of projects, how y'all have them broken down between risk reduction and programmatic risk reduction projects? Am I correct in understanding that the ones that are like the programmatic ones that are like, smaller scale, localized kind of effects or whatever, is that more towards, as far as the funding goes, those don't need to go through the evaluation process as some of these other larger projects do. They just kind of they're already considered because they already line up with the master plan. So then are they kind of just left to funding that's remaining funding that's available to kind of hit these smaller scale ones as opposed to like, a larger hydrological basin or, marsh creation and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's correct. And we'll talk about those a little bit more in the next section, actually, but I think your understanding is spot on. So, yeah, those don't have to be evaluated individually or included individually in the master plan. All of those activities are just generally considered consistent with the master plan. So they can go on to be evaluated by a specific funding source for their decision on whether to move forward with the project. But the consistency with the master plan box is already checked.
Okay. So then they still get submitted, like, I'm sorry, I found my head. They still just get submitted like per usual, or they don't have to. Like, we don't have to do like the submission form for like suggestions. We still do that for these. Okay.
You do not have to submit programmatically consistent project types for through the submission form. Those, because the master plan is really separate from the actual funding action, those projects can go straight to a funding source or a funding program and can skip the master plan step altogether.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yep.
Shannon? Just unmuted you.
Yes, ma'am. Where can we find the information to understand what is considered a programmatic project versus these other ones that you're looking for?
Sure. I'm actually going to cover it in the next section, so we will talk about it in just a couple of minutes. And I'll point you to some written resources as well that you can go back to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great.
All right.
Just one Q&A.
Okay.
What are the typical funding sources for CPRA master plan projects?
Sure. Typical funding sources. So we have a variety of funding sources that we have access to in different ways. The CPRA program, let's see if I can do it, the Coastal Wetlands Planning and Protection Resources Act, has historically been the core source of funding for CPRA projects over the course of the life of this agency. And then in the last several years, we've also had some of the different funding streams that have come from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. That's been a really important part of our ability to fund and construct very large projects that we weren't able to do with just the CPRA funds alone. We also have funding from GOMESA as well. And so revenue sharing from offshore oil activities. And there are a number of other sources as well, but those are the biggest, I think I would say that fund our projects, the biggest sources. And Brian, if you wanted to add anything to that, Ashley can unmute you. Sorry, Ashley.
That's fine.
Okay.
What is going on here? Brian, I unmuted you if you'd like to say anything.
No, that was a pretty good list, Katie. There is a lot of federal investment, Corps of Engineers and other federal entities investments that we're able to move some of these, get some of the master plan projects involved and some of the federal interest as well, both on the structural and the restoration side. And then, of course, Louisiana legislature. So Yeah, that was a good list of things.
Okay. I think, should we move on and,
Yes.
okay. All right, so project types. We try to take a comprehensive approach to projects. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox to address the goals of the master plan. So I'm going to break this down in a handful of different ways to talk about each of these project types. So first, everything is rooted in our goals, the master plan goals. So our first goal is to reduce risk of risk from storm surge based flooding. And the primary functions that our projects perform to address that goal are they can block or dampen storm surge. It can involve moving away from risk, avoiding risk. And then third, they can involve floodproofing or raising structures and infrastructure. And so the first line, the top line of our project matrix is the project types that address that first goal. So we've got our structural risk reduction projects, which include things like levees, floodgates, flood walls, and then our non-structural risk reduction projects. So home elevations, floodproofing of structures in place, voluntary acquisitions, things like that. And then outside of the master plan, even there can be some policy approaches that would fit under this umbrella too. So those are our risk reduction projects. Here's an example of a structural risk reduction project as well. Okay, our second goal, reducing land loss. There are three main functions that our projects perform to address this goal. So we can increase elevation with sediment input, we can promote conditions for healthy vegetation and organic accretion, and we can reduce erosion. I'm going to break each of those down a little bit more. So how do we increase elevation with sediment input? We can use dredge sediment in a beneficial way. We can connect to tidal or riverine sediment inputs, and we can increase suspended sediment trapping and accumulation efficiency. So we can try to collect more of the sediment that is in water, fresh water that might flow past. All right, the second function that supports the second goal is promoting conditions for healthy vegetation and organic accretion. Two of the ways that our projects do that are improving hydrology, so trying to get appropriate water levels or salinities, and maintaining a diversity of vegetative communities coastwide to boost resilience. Finally, reducing erosion. So three of the ways that our projects can help us do that are by reducing encroachment of waterways into vegetated wetlands. So trying to prevent canals and things like that from expanding, widening, and taking over wetlands. Reducing wind and wave-driven erosion on our barrier islands, and then reducing wave-driven erosion in wetlands. So these are the project types that help us perform those functions that directly address our land loss reduction goal. So we've got a set of restoration projects that and a set of risk reduction project types. I'm going to break these down one additional way. Here's an example of what it looks like when we use dredge sediment in a beneficial way. But actually, I'm going to break them down in another slide. But one tool that we have to kind of line up what project types fit with each of these functions I just talked about, you can find in the project types booklet that is available on the website that where you found the link to register for this webinar. So the project types booklet actually includes a matrix that helps you line up which project types actually help to perform which of the functions we just talked about. And it can be either always or sometimes, depending on the design and location of the specific project. I do want to clarify, these are not hard and fast rules, but this is a helpful starting point for folks who might need a little bit of guidance on understanding how all of this fits together. Okay, so the other way that we break down our set of projects is what Clay was asking about in the last question break. So we have our set of project types that we do evaluate and select individually for inclusion in the master plan. And those are the ones that we want folks to submit project ideas for, the ones highlighted in green here. And then we have our programmatically consistent project types. So non-structural risk reduction, barrier island risk maintenance, and then a lot of these smaller scale activities, like Clay was talking about, where the benefits are highly localized and really customized to specific situations. But we find these activities, we agree that these activities are consistent with achieving the goals of the master plan. And so that consistency with master plan bucket or box is already checked, and those can move forward for evaluation by a funding program or whatever other things need to be done to get to implementation. But they don't need to be listed individually in the master plan for them to be considered consistent. All right. So here's another example of the type of information that's available in that project types booklet that I talked about before. So we've got a section view of each of the project types, and you can see some additional details about how these project types might look on landscape and the different pieces of them. You can also see how we've lined them up with different functions that speak directly to our goals, what some of the common components of each project type is, how they might stack up relative to other master plan projects in terms of sustainability and cost, and then co-benefits. So a lot of our projects have additional benefits beyond just achieving the goals of the master plan. You can see this a little bit more with the marsh creation example. So again, all of the project types, you can find a spread like this for them in the project types booklet. But there are a wide range of co-benefits that we achieve when we do marsh creation, not just reducing land loss. All right, so together, when we actually implement the master plan projects, this is what we can achieve. And well, actually, this is what we have achieved to date. So this is through 2024. By implementing projects from the master plan, we have been able to benefit 67,000 acres of land. We've used over 220 million cubic yards of fill material, of dredged sediment, typically dredged. And we restored 71, almost 72 miles of barrier islands and berms, and improved 383 miles of levee. The master plan itself has been a really important tool in enabling us to secure over $20 billion in funding by showing that we have a science-informed plan where we identify our priorities and we can show, as Brian often says, that we're all pulling on the same rope, we're moving in the same direction together. That enables us to secure a whole lot more funding than we would be able to otherwise to be able to accomplish all of this. This is an overview of where projects have been implemented. This can be found in our annual plan. And it's just a high level overview of where we've completed projects over the course of the agency's lifespan. Now, implementing projects isn't just a state activity. To take a project from the master plan to the ground, to being built, really requires all hands on deck. So everything from Congress providing funds, federal agencies and states often working together, even with parish officials, a local government, tribes, to get a project moving forward, get it designed, get it into construction, get it permitted. NGOs, business and industry, and residents, one of the most important things that they do is advocate for projects. And also, there's an important education role as well for a lot of these parties. And together, we're able to implement these projects and have a more sustainable coast. And I also want to highlight that our objectives do wind up getting achieved in various ways when we focus on addressing the master plan goals. So just a reminder of what our objectives are and really how we support, for example, the working coast with each project looks a little bit different. In some projects, we might benefit one aspect of the working coast, and another project, 5 other aspects of the working coast. But together, we weave a web where these things we value are improved. And this is a nice visual of that. So our work together hopefully is making it so that we can all live, work, and play longer on the coast. All right, so before I get into how we screen and evaluate projects, we're going to pause again for questions on that explanation of project types.
There's nothing in the chat. And then I don't know if Valerie and Shannon, if you still have questions, but I see your hands are up. All right, well, I guess there's no questions.
Okay. All right, we'll keep moving. Okay, so a reminder of where this is in the process. So public submits projects, we screen them, then they potentially become candidate projects that get evaluated in models. So first I'm going to talk about screening, the screening process right here. All right, some of these slides have a lot of text, but I want to make sure and go through bullet by bullet each of these items. So this is how we conduct our desktop screening. Really what we're looking for in the screening process is to separate out any projects that just aren't a fit for the master plan in general. So our first check is whether it aligns with the goals, objectives, and principles of the master plan. If you want to see, I didn't cover our principles today. The 2023 master plan has a great spread early in the document that lays out the principles in addition to the goals and objectives of the master plan. So you can look at that up there. We also check to make sure that the dominant feature of a project is not already programmatically consistent with the master plan. So anything, as Clay was asking, anything that is a programmatically consistent project type will get screened out because we don't need to evaluate it further. We are looking for projects that benefit an area of roughly at least around 500 acres. That's not a hard, fast rule, but we're looking for project types that have, or project ideas that have a big impact. Really, we prefer much more than 500 acres, but at a minimum, we're looking for at least around 500 acres. If you're proposing a standalone structural risk reduction project, so like a floodgate, it has to tie into an existing flood protection system, whether natural or man-made. Typically, you can't just have a floodgate on its own where water would just go around it. So we'll be looking for things like that. We want to make sure that that projects address significant projected flood risk or land loss. So we don't just want to, let me start over. We don't just want to address today's problems. We also want to make sure that we're thinking about what the problems are going to be in the future and how the current problems are going to evolve over the next 50 years. So for this, we highly recommend that folks explore the future without action projections that are in the 2023 master plan data viewer. That's also linked to from the page where you registered for this webinar. So in the data viewer, you can look ahead at a variety of components, a variety of variables, and how we have projected that they might change into the future. You can zoom in or out of your area, out to the region, out to the whole coast, and it really is a user-friendly way to explore the future without action projections. I highly recommend you dig into that to try to check this box proactively. We don't want to evaluate any projects that are already evaluated in a more detailed way through another program. So anything that would be covered by the Chafalaya Basin program, we do not need to also evaluate here in the master plan. If a project makes it into the Chapelaya Basin master plan, it'll be considered consistent with this coastal master plan for the state. And same for the Barrier Island System Management Program. That overlaps with the programmatic project type of barrier island management or maintenance. We also don't want projects that are highly similar to a project that was in the 2023 coastal master plan. Because as I said before, all of the 2023 master plan projects are going to be included in our analysis in one way or another already. Now, if you have a project idea that's highly similar to one that we analyzed for an older plan, older than 2023, then if you submit it, you need to tell us, you need to provide a compelling argument for why it should be reanalyzed, why we would expect a different result from this analysis than a previous analysis where it would have been removed from further consideration. And then finally, this is new for this master plan. We are piloting a constructability check. So a little bit more about constructability. This is not going to be a hard and fast check, but we do need to look at the screening phase at whether we think that a project could actually be built. On the tail end, after funding, when it's implemented. So we'll be looking at things like, if we know that an area, if the geotechnical conditions in an area won't support a certain project type, there's some land that just can't handle a heavy project being put on top of it, right? Or the water's too deep for a certain project type to be successful. If we know for sure that a project just isn't feasible in a certain area, then we would like to eliminate it at the screening process. So if there are insurmountable oil and gas infrastructure risks, most oil and gas infrastructure risks can be worked around, can be dealt with. But if we can see that the risks are insurmountable, it might get screened out. We want to check and make sure that we can identify some reasonable sediment source for the projects that would need it. We might have experience in certain areas doing projects and use that experience also to know, nope, that's just not going to work here. We need to do it a different way. For structural risk reduction projects, we want to make sure that we're sufficiently avoiding potential impacts to things like wetlands, existing structures, utilities. Again, a lot of that can be worked around in implementation, but if there's something that we think is going to be a deal breaker, we'd rather identify it now. And same, any known geologic or topographic limitations to success. Like if we know something about the geography that's going to make it a project impossible, then we want to screen it out now. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a risk scorecard looking at each of these types of these categories of information, and then we'll step back and look and see if we think that a project needs to be screened out based on the identified risks, if we need to revise the project to just reduce the risks, or if we just need to make a note that these risks exist and they're going to have to figure out how to address them in implementation. So this, like I said, we're piloting this and hopeful that it will help at least take any impossible projects off the table. But we want to be sure, we're going to be careful not to dismiss anything too quickly. All right, candidate project evaluation. So after a project passes the screening and then becomes a candidate project, then eventually it will be evaluated in our models. And at that point, we're looking at performance related to our goals. So we evaluate our candidate projects in our models to see how well they meet our master plan goals over 50 years compared to a future without action. So the primary metrics I keep having issues with these bubbles. Keep not showing up the way I want them to. But so our primary metrics, the things that we look at to measure success in achieving the first goal are expected annual damages reduced in both dollars and structural equivalents. And then our primary metric that we use to look at success in achieving the second goal, land loss reduction, is average annual acres of land compared to a future without action. So these are actually the same primary metrics that we used for the 2023 master plan. In that case, we called them decision drivers, and now we're calling them primary metrics. We also want to emphasize that we are looking for some additional things in projects. Now, all of these are like recommendations, and some of them carry a bit more weight than others, and some of those details are going to be ironed out later. But generally, we want to let you know that we're going to be looking for projects that that continue to provide benefits into the future. We're accounting for sea level rise and subsidence. And we prefer projects that don't require heavy maintenance to provide that service into the future. We want to do things like making contributions to maintaining estuary salinity gradients in future decades, right? So this is our hydrologic restoration type projects, or ridge restorations or marsh complexes that can prevent saltwater intrusion or just support maintaining healthy salinities into the future. We also prefer the use of renewable sediment sources or out of system sediment sources. So in our eyes, it's better to use like a river where if we dredge sediment from it, it's going to be filled back in over the years, or sediment from the Gulf of Mexico, instead of an inshore source where once we dig a hole, it's going to remain a hole and not get filled back in. We do use interior non-renewable sources also, but our preference is for renewable ones. And then for risk reduction projects, we're looking for community or regional scale benefits, not just one neighborhood or a smaller area like that. We want to make sure, and we do measure this, or look for this specifically in project evaluation, that a project doesn't wind up having more negative impacts over 50 years than positive ones. So the net effect must be positive over the full 50-year period. And then we really do want projects that provide benefits for multiple decades into the future. This is one that that factors into the decision of whether to include a project in the master plan or not, or whether it provides benefits for multiple decades. So that's our overview of how we screen and evaluate projects. Before I pause for questions again, I just want to highlight some of the resources that we have available to support you in developing new project ideas to submit. So there's a process overview, documentation of guidelines for developing projects and screening criteria. A lot of the information that I've just gone over is available in writing on our 2029 Coastal Master Plan page. We also have answers to frequently asked questions there, and a link to the master plan data viewer that I mentioned before. This is the 2023 Coastal Master Plan data viewer. And again, it's got a ton of information. We highly recommend, if you haven't explored it before, to take the guided tour that's offered at the top. It really shows you exactly how to use the tool and what you can do with it. And then we also have a link to the project submission form on that website. We also, a couple things to note about the project submission form. We're not going to walk through it here. We think it's pretty intuitive and we've got good instructions. We also have a tutorial video that you can watch that's up at the top of the form. But also I want to note that you can explore the form with dummy content. So there are some fields that are required to be filled out before you can move on to the next page. But if you want to just see what all's in there before you get to work entering a project, you can enter in, just words, just some text, so that you can move on through the fields. And then you can go back again and then start from the beginning to fill out your actual project submission. So just a trick if you want to see the end before you start at the beginning. And in theory, and it has worked for me, but I don't want to promise that it'll work every time, but the form should remember what you've already entered if you come back to the same browser. So if you start filling in a project submission, and then you have to walk away and come back to it again, it should still be there. Even if you close your browser and come back on another day, it should recognize you if you use the same browser again, and have all your information still in there. Careful, and don't come after me if it doesn't work, but we did set it up to allow that. So there's a chance that it'll work. Okay. And next, we've developed a number of resources that are really geared towards helping the folks who haven't participated in this process before be able to participate effectively. So a lot of our resources are developed for the folks who always participate or, work with us a whole lot. We definitely want all of you who have traditionally been our partners to continue to submit good project ideas for us. But we also want to make sure that this process is accessible to a lot more people than it has been before. And so some of the products that we've generated are specifically geared towards addressing that. So we're going to record this webinar and post it on the website. We're having public workshops, in-person workshops at 4 locations around the state. And the first one is next Wednesday night in Abbeville. All of the information about our public workshops is also on our website. So please go there and register in advance because that's how we get our head counts for the dinner that will be served there. But at those workshops, folks can come and learn about the plan and the tools that we have available to support developing project ideas. And you can also sit down with experts and work on your project ideas right there. We'll even have somebody there with the project submission form pulled up, and you can sit down and enter your project idea together if you want hands-on help during these in-person workshops. And then beyond what CPRA is hosting, several of our NGO partners are also going to be hosting workshops around the coast to support the public in participating in the new project development process. So be on the lookout for information from CRCL, from the Restore the Mississippi River Delta Coalition, Restore or Retreat, and another number of others who might be hosting workshops that spin off of what we're providing. We also have a new website that's specific to new project development, and it provides a great introduction to the master plan, to our process, and to the pieces of new project development in a much more accessible way. It explains a whole lot better and has great visuals. So that's something that might be helpful to you, or you might be able to point somebody else to it who you think it would be helpful to look at. Again, there's a link to that from the MP29 website. And then the booklets that I talked about, there's the project types booklet, and then there's a booklet that can walk somebody through the process of trying to think about a coastal challenge and gather the information that they might need for a project idea before they go to the online tool to submit. And then we are also going to be having virtual office hours. So within the next few days, we'll be posting on the same website a link where you can sign up for virtual office hours to sit down live virtually with our team and ask questions, whatever questions you might have. And that's open to everybody, not just new folks to the process, but seasoned experts as well. Okay. Back to my quick facts summary. So anyone can submit a project through the online form. The level of detail is flexible. anything from a definition of a project need, telling us about a challenge you see, to a fully developed project. You'll have an opportunity to upload documents. Like if you have a design document for a project, you want to upload it, you can do that within the submission form. You can also upload a hand-drawn sketch of your project idea in the project submission form. So a range of things, a range of levels of detail and level of development are all welcome. We emphasize that submitting in the first public solicitation period will give you the opportunity to get feedback if your project is screened out, and then resubmit in the second period. And we can't offer that same feedback, revise, resubmit opportunity if you submit in the second period. Avoid extensive overlap with 23 coastal master plan projects. They're already on the table. And re-emphasizing that submitted projects get screened. Projects that pass the screening become candidate projects to get evaluated in our models. And then the best combination of those projects winds up going into the master plan. And then once the project's in the master plan, it then can be eligible outside of the master plan for a potential funding opportunity when one becomes available. So just submitting a project does not mean that you're going to see your project on the ground necessarily, but it's an important first step to getting to that end. All right. Our next section of this webinar is going to focus on how to develop and submit a project idea, but really it's targeted to folks who are new to this process. So everybody is welcome to stay on, but anybody can also drop off. But we'll pause before we move on to that for any questions about anything that we've presented today.
So we have one that Brian's going to take.
Okay.
How is this program impacted by the recent cancellation of the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project and remaining 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill settlement?
Well, thanks. And those of you that know me, I was sitting here typing one-handed a nice answer, but I'll delete that on there and save me some time on it. So first, the second part of that question. There's obviously with this announcement would be a considerable dollars of the in this case the NRDA spill money remaining. That money will continue to flow in Louisiana to fund projects that restore for injury from that spill. The good thing is there are many projects through different funding streams that we have in various phases of engineering and design. So we won't have the lag time on these projects. You can see them move relatively quickly once we go through sort of the process that the NRD would require to get them going on there. And there's a fairly extensive process, but thankfully we're along in that game. As far as particular projects in the 29 plan, we will assess that in the coming year before this modeling to really understand what projects we're going to consider in the future without action on there. Are these likely to be constructed by the time these new candidate projects would be entering into the system? So Katie mentioned it's a living document, and we're doing just that. We'll take a look in that and see if this project is. Obviously, if a large scale project like that is not in a future without action, that'll change the project makeup on some of these things. So stay tuned for that. We're going to address that as we go. We try to make that as most timely decision as we can when we have to make it to ensure that we get the best look for 29 on the landscape. So thank you for the question. If you have anything else particular, happy to answer.
And then do projects that make it through screening but do not make it into the plan after modeling receive feedback as well?
Yeah, so I think our plan is to do that this time. So we're going to try to do, one of the things that we gain with the online submission form is a much cleaner record of who submitted what and the contact information associated with them. Everything I think is going to be a lot easier to manage this time, because of the benefits of that online form and the organization that it gives us. And so, yes, our plan is to let you know what happens with your project, ultimately. A lot of times, what could happen is that your project idea might get merged with another project idea that gets submitted. Something where we can see a synergy between the two and think that it would add more value to combine them, or if there's overlap, we might revise the project. So I think that's part of why a lot of times feedback hasn't come all the way back around, because it's hard to follow the path from an initial project idea that gets submitted to what actually comes out of the modeling. But we've heard from many people just how interested they are in getting that loop closed at the end. So we're going to be making a concerted effort to follow the thread all the way through and be able to report back on how, what happened with the project idea that was submitted.
Another question, is the work for the diversion going to continue to finish out the phase that's currently funded? Is it possible to resubmit as a possible project?
So as of right now, we are not closing the door to any project ideas. So any project idea that you have that you want to see on the table for screening and potential evaluation should go ahead and be submitted. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, everything's open for project submittal. Thanks.
I don't see any hands raised or any more questions.
All right, terrific. Okay, so again, this next part of the webinar is going to be targeted towards folks who are newer to the process. So feel free to drop off if that doesn't apply to you. But we thought it would be helpful to walk through for folks who are newer, kind of break down a little bit more in detail how to go about thinking about a project idea and submitting it. So first, where to start. So we would say to start by, I think a lot of folks who are on the call now, or who might be watching this webinar as a recording, probably already have something in mind, right? There's a problem that you see on the ground that you think you'd like to contribute towards addressing, to making better, right? So first check is to make sure that it is somehow related to the master plan goals. So is it related to storm surge based flood risk, or related to land loss somehow? So that first check, if the answer is yes, then I would move on to understanding the history of the current situation, the problem that you see, right? How did it get here? What do you think are the hazards that have brought it to be, that need to be potentially addressed, right? And also, how long has it been going on? Is this a brand new problem, or is this something that you've been seeing repeatedly for years? Is it something that happens every time you get a certain type of storm system coming through, right? All of that type of information is helpful to us in understanding the problem. And it's helpful to you too in coming up with a project idea that will specifically address and yield the change that you're hoping to see. We don't want you to just think about the past, though. We also want you to think about the potential future, right? And so we would ask you to dig in to the data viewer, the master plan data viewer from 2023, and zoom in on the area that you're focused on, and look at how it's expected to change into the future. You can look at a variety of different variables within the data viewer. If you like to play with data and explore things, you can also go to the master plan data access portal and download some of the data yourself or explore it in different ways. But the master plan data viewer that is linked off of the master plan 29 website is the most user-friendly way to start to explore this data. So go dig in and look at how the area and the problem are expected to potentially change into the future over the next 50 years. You can also, if you're not starting with a problem already, you can go and explore a certain area that you really care about. Say, in the data viewer, look at how that area is projected to change over the next 50 years. Or if there's a certain activity that you're interested in, right? Try to look at the data viewer information over the next 50 years and see if it can provide clues as to how the activity that you like to do might be influenced or change over time. And that can help you come up with a project idea as well. All right, then next, I would say, and as part of this overlaps, of course, with step one, but identify which hazards that your project needs to address and the functions that your project will need to serve. And there's two levels to think about the functions here. So number one, think about your challenge itself, the details of how your challenge is a challenge, the problem, right? And what needs to be addressed to solve it, but also check and make sure that you're considering how master plan goals are addressed explicitly. Because in this process, as we explained before, that's how the projects ultimately get evaluated, is based on performance related to the master plan goals. You can use that project types booklet as a tool for thinking about the hazards and also the functions that you want your project to serve. There are other functions beyond the ones that we laid out that are important and contribute to our objectives. So you might extend the list and start to think about what project types can serve the functions that you need and address the hazards. There's also a section I showed before, the page where the project types are mapped to the functions related to the master plan goals, but there's also a section that maps some of those basic hazards to different project types as well. And then from there, you wind up narrowing down the list of project types that will best address your problem. And I want to flag that integrated projects are always welcome. So integrated projects are projects that take two different project types and put them together to work synergistically to achieve the goals of your project, to just address your coastal challenge. And really, we see as we make progress in addressing coastal land loss, especially, we think that integrated projects are going to be more and more valuable to achieving kind of regional broad goals that we have in the master plan. And then also within the project types booklet, there's going to be some information that can help you check to make sure that the area you're looking at is suited to the project type that you pick. So, if a certain project type really struggles to be built in areas that have water depths that are greater than 3 feet, and you're trying to develop a project idea in 6 feet of water, then that might not be good alignment, and you might need to think about a different project type to address your goal, or think about where else you can locate your project, where it could be both feasible and achieve what you're looking for. Once you have your project idea and you've thought it through, we're going to ask you to describe it as to the extent that you can. So first, we want you to come up with a descriptive name. So often what we do is we'll say like a location and the project type. So Oyster Bayou Marsh Creation, something like that. It helps us, the more descriptive your name is without being too long, the better it is for us in our working process. We'll want you to describe the goals and intended functions of your project. So both the goals as they relate to the master plan goals and the functions that support those, but also any additional goals that you might have for your project. would like you to provide some information, if you can, about how you expect the project to work and how you expect it's going to benefit the area. What are the benefits that you think your project is likely to be able to achieve, and how long do you think they're likely to be able to last? And then to meet that, to last as long as you describe, how much maintenance is going to be required? Are we going to have to come in and rebuild the project again in a few years? Or do we just need to check in and make sure that the water control structure is continued to function properly? So the level of maintenance that you expect is also helpful information to us. And then any kind of drawing that you can provide. So in the online project submission form, there's going to be a place where you can draw one polygon on a map to provide the outline of the area where your project features are intended to be. But a lot of times just one box around your project area isn't quite enough detail to really understand what you're proposing. And so you can submit a scan of a hand drawing of your project, the different project features that make up your project, or you can sketch it out in Google Earth and save a KMZ file, or in GIS or in CAD, depending on your level of comfort with various tools that are out there. But regardless, however you draw out your project idea, you can upload a digital file within the online project submission form to share with us. And you can upload any other supporting files within your submission form as well. Anything that you that you think will help us evaluate your project the way that you imagine it. And I really want to emphasize that you only have to cover the level of detail that you're comfortable providing. Like, if you don't really know exactly how long the benefits might last, you can even say, well, I hope it would be for 2 or 3 decades or something to that effect. Or you might have a design document or modeling that actually provides, a much more refined estimate of how long you think it might last. So wherever you're comfortable providing the information, do it that way. We don't expect for consistency across the board from all of the submissions we get. There's a workbook on the website. In addition to the project types booklet, there's a project submission booklet. And that booklet, it was designed to help walk you through step by step the same process I've just described. So thinking about a project idea, getting your information organized before you go to the online form to submit. And then, like I said before, there's a tutorial available too. This is a view from our new project development website. And there's also a link to this same video at the very beginning of the survey tool if you go to it. And you can watch that video and see some of the nuts and bolts about how to navigate within the project idea form. Yeah, and that's about it. I do have a few additional slides about what happens to a project after it's submitted. But I'll pause first about to see if there are any questions related to developing and submitting a project idea.
So this question is kind of following up off of the thread of questions from the last question break. What about the current work on the diversion? Going to finish out? And I believe Brian said he.
Yeah, the current decision by the administration is that the diversion as it is, the work will pause, stop, and shut down. So there is no additional work going on the Mid-Barataria diversion construction site now. So that is an official stopping of work as it is.
And then I know we have does the cancellation of Mid-Barataria sediment diversion affect the data viewer at all? Is that project on the landscape in those scenarios? What about Mid-Breton? And so, currently they are in the master plan 23 data viewer. That just can't be updated in time for it to be useful to everyone. But for the rest of that question, we are going to put in a written response that's more thorough. So hang tight on that and we'll post it in the chat, in the Q&A. And then Scooter, you have, may I unmute you? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank y'all. On the project upload, I kind of played with it and I had trouble loading a KMZ file. It wouldn't upload. Is that possible?
It should be. We'll look into that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we definitely want that to be a function that you can do.
There is
Okay,
the
thank you.
megabyte, if it wasn't, which
I'm sorry?
the megabyte limit was a KMZ greater than 100 megabytes. That's not
They're
much.
usually so small. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't, yeah, I thought it was like 13 or it might have been less. I'm not sure. Maybe I need to check that.
Yeah, double check it, but I mean, usually KMC files aren't very big, so, yeah, we'll definitely follow up with you on that, and make sure that we can resolve that.
Thanks.
Thank you for testing it too. We really do appreciate that. Hi, Michael. We're gonna pause questions real quick, and well, we're just, we're in the middle of Q&A actually right now, so it's a perfect time to hop in. Yeah, our new executive director, Michael Hare, is here.
Hey, is it afternoon? No, not yet. Good morning, everyone. Already a long day. Hope everyone's having a good Friday. I just want to stop in very quickly and say how much I appreciate the work that goes into this. It is obviously a continual process. As I said to a group yesterday, I happened to join a different group that was working on the master plan just after I'd walked out of a planning session with the governor on emergency response. And it really dawned on me that the things we're going to have today to help us against today's hurricanes were probably thoughts on a paper 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so the new ideas you're bringing to the table today that we can discuss over the next several years and make it into the 2029 plan are truly, tomorrow's defense against hurricanes and the ability to protect our coast. So please keep bringing big ideas. Please bring new stuff to the table. I'm really not sure if there's anything more important than doing this, because without these new ideas coming into our system, we're going to run out of stuff to do, but the fight's not going to go away, and we're still going to have challenges on our coast. So I just really want to stop by to just say good morning, thank you. I'm excited about this process to actually be able to sort of dig in the weeds a little bit more with everyone. And I'm sure I will see many of you at the regional meetings and around the coast in the coming weeks and months. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions about developing and submitting a project idea?
None in the chat.
None in the chat?
And no hands raised. Oh, Shannon, go ahead.
I have not explored the project submission yet, but before I do, my question is, if you begin the submission process and realize you don't have enough information, is there a way to go back, save it, and be able to go back to it and complete the submission?
So in theory, yes. So it is set up so that there isn't a save button that you'll see. But if you have just your web browser that you use, and you close it out and come back to it on another day, open it back up, it should recognize you and have all of your information that you've already submitted already in there. I can't promise that's always going to work, right? That seems a little and that's just me being skeptical, and transparent. It's supposed to work just fine. but there's a chance it won't. Luckily, there isn't a ton of information that you need to provide here, but I would say, like, especially some of the like free response, like where you're providing like a few sentences or a paragraph to describe the benefits of your project or something like that. You might want to, if you're gonna have to step away for a while, you might want to like just paste that text into a Word document or something, so it's easy to grab again, and just copy and paste into your submission form. And the other option you have is, you know, to submit it without the additional detail, if it's not something that's even developed yet, and it's a gap that you're comfortable with us filling in on our end.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then Clay?
So if we have, because I have a plan that we got recently from a consultant group. So I can take those projects that we have proposed and put them into the submission form, correct?
Yes.
As they stand so far. I mean, if we want to add stuff to it, obviously we can or rethink, but so we can take those projects and submit them.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, fantastic.
That's it for right now.
That's it. Okay. The last set of slides that I have, we do get questions from folks about what happens after a project idea is submitted. Where does my project go? And I think we've covered that in a lot of ways, but I've just got a handful of slides that to really drive that home and make it really clear. So there's the master plan process diagram that we've talked through a couple different times here. And then up at the top, there's going to be kind of the roadmap for the life of a project as it goes from submission to the real world. So during the public solicitation, new projects can be proposed by anyone, as we said, right? And then step 2 is where, you know, CPRA is gathering all of the new project ideas from all the different sources. And then we do the screening. So ineligible projects, so unsuitable projects for the master plan for whatever reason, are returned either with feedback if you submit in the first period or just removed from the process. Or if we determine that it's a programmatic project, then, you know, it's not kicked out as much as it's just set into, you know, it's not going to be carried forward in the master plan process, but we still like it. It's still consistent with the plan. All right, step 4, when we look at the modeling, right? So projects get evaluated by their models for their benefits over the next 50 years, right? And projects that don't meet master plan goals there, like the ones that provide net negative benefits, are automatically removed at that point. Automatically, there's a process, but they get removed. And then from the remaining projects, we work with our advisory groups and experts to develop the ultimate project list that makes it into the master plan to essentially try to maximize benefits within the constraints that we establish. And projects that don't make it onto that final list are also not included in that plan, in the plan. We publish a draft plan at the end of 2028. We will be publishing a draft plan that shows all the projects we've selected. We hold public hearings on that plan to get formal public input on the plan. And then with that public input, we revise the plan before we submit it to the legislature for approval towards the middle of 2029. So then after the legislature approves the plan, then the plan is published, and outside of the plan, then individuals, locals, state, federal partners can advocate for the projects, can find funding for the projects, and can implement the projects. And you can see here, this shows that those programmatically consistent projects can take the shortcut all the way to that step 8 and skip the middle. And that's it. There's just those few extra slides to illustrate what actually happens to a specific project idea that's submitted. And so that's all the content that we wanted to present today in this webinar. And we'll hang on in case anybody has any additional questions or comments they'd like to make.
We do have one question in the chat.
Okay.
Could we access any past successful or unsuccessful project ideas that we can use as examples to draft proposals?
Yeah, so actually in the master plan data viewer, you can go and you can click on a project and you can find a project fact sheet, which will have details about a project. But I wouldn't take that, like, those are all the projects that are covered there in the data viewer were successful projects, that made it into the master plan. Now, they might look a little different from how they were initially proposed, as a project idea. So, and really, we're doing the project idea submission a lot differently this time than we have in previous plans. So I don't want to point anybody to a previous project idea that was submitted, because this time we're a lot more flexible on the level of detail that's required. So really, the key is looking for ways that you can propose projects that you think have a good chance of directly addressing master plan goals, right? So reducing land loss, or storm surge based flood risk. And we've laid out a lot of different things you can think about to connect a project idea to those functions that get us to those master plan goals. I'd say, if you bake that into your project idea and maybe even explain to us in the form how you think your project is going to be able to achieve the goals you want it to achieve. And if you told us about your problem, then, you have a really good chance of us being able to work with your project and at least get it in for consideration, for evaluation in the models. I think you shouldn't stress so much about it looking, having a certain type of information other than what I just described, right? If you've got more information, great. But if you don't, it's okay. Submit it anyway. And we'll see what we can do with it.
I don't see any hands raised or any questions in the chat yet. Could give it another minute or two, and then as always, you can email us at masterplan@la.gov, and it's on the screen now. It's also in the chat, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
And thank you again for participating. We appreciate your time spent with us today, and the fact that you're thinking about submitting project ideas for master plan consideration. It really takes participation by the whole community to have our master plan continue to be innovative, continue to find new ways to address the challenges that we see along our coast. So thank you.